Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing and That's Badass Wood Art. Remember to go over to that'sbadasswoodart.com and use promo code CTPocket for 20% off any one item on their store. And if you're here watching us, help us hit our goal of 3,000 subscribers. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tons of content coming out this offseason and NFL draft related stuff as well. Ryan, a long anticipated announcement. We weren't quite sure where it was going to go, but Harrison Smith is back with the Minnesota Vikings on a restructured deal that's worth up to $8 million this season and saves the Vikings $6.7 million in cap space. What are your thoughts on this move?
Yeah, I'm happy. You know, he's a player that I was actually really excited to watch in the Brian Flores defense, given just the different disguises and different ways he likes to use his safeties, and the news that we potentially were going to be cutting him. I mean, a lot of reports came out that there was a good chance we were going to cut him, and it was leaning that way.
Yeah.
So for us to be able to make it work, get him back at an affordable cost. I mean, I think somebody in one of our group chats just had mentioned we're basically keeping him for like $680,000 more than we would have had to cut him for, right?
Oh,
so
for
$700K, you're getting to keep him on roster and keep a valuable player that will bring leadership to that defense. Again, we did lose a couple of our core leaders on that defense with Pat Pete leaving and with Eric Kendricks leaving. And potentially Za'Darius. That's the only domino left to kind of fall here.
Yeah.
And so keeping Harrison Smith, a longest tenured Viking on roster, is a huge win.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I think stands out, at least with this specific deal with Harrison Smith, is it's already been said that he had a number of opportunities to go elsewhere. So like the fact that he was committed to staying here in Minnesota, obviously the NFLPA ranked Minnesota as one of the best organizations to play for and work at. But what do you think about that? Like the fact that this guy's been here his whole career, has a chance to probably go get more or about the same in a new space for maybe even a contender. And he says, no, I'm going to sit still and stay with the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, I think he sees the opportunity. So basically this restructured deal, I believe, just cuts him down to this being the final year in his deal. So he's going to have that opportunity. The way I'm looking at it is if I were him, I'm going to take this opportunity to work with Brian Flores, get my stock back up to what it, was pre Donatel, which after Donatel, he really plummeted the stock there. So get his stock back up and hopefully get one last, at least mid-sized payday going into, 2024 and beyond. So I think it's a smart move by him, given the fact that he's going to get to work with a defensive coach that's really going to be able to emphasize all of the skills, like the core skills that Harrison Smith has.
Yeah. Mary in the comments already is just like, can't wait to watch him with Flores. And that was, when we brought Flores on board, that was like the first thing that stood out to me is like Harrison Smith is a guy who's likely going to flourish in whatever defensive scheme that Brian Flores wants to bring here. So what kind of skills can we look to? Trying to figure out the best way to say this, but
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah.
So what can he bring to this defense that we can expect from Harrison Smith is a player that's going to disguise his coverage quite a bit. So with the Dolphins, you take a look at like a guy like Javon Holland or Eric Rowe, they use their safeties kind of interchangeably. So you're not quite sure who's going to stay back and who's going to be blitzing. And with Harrison Smith's ability to play more as a kind of like a box defender, you're gonna have a lot of disguises of not knowing exactly what he's going to do. Is he going to run a shallow zone? Is he going to blitz? Is he going to bail out and go into single high or a two high safety look? So and you have the ability for him to kind of play a little bit of man-to-man against tight ends and running backs and whatnot. So this is what Harrison Smith did for Mike Zimmer. So think of kind of what we remember seeing him under Mike Zimmer's tutelage, right? He was kind of, you never knew exactly what he was going to do. that's the type of style you're going to see back in Harrison Smith versus what we saw last year, which is that more too high look pretty much primarily all the time.
Before we transition to some of the other conversation, this thought kind of popped up in my head right now when we think about Harrison Smith, and you talked about his tenure with Mike Zimmer. Is Harrison Smith one of the best like draft picks of all time for the Vikings? I'm
Gosh,
putting you on the
he
spot
might,
here, but
he
like
might be like, I mean,
ever
yeah, I
since
mean,
he got
he's
here
got to
as a
be up there at
rookie,
least with our generation, right? I mean,
yes,
obviously, you take a look at some of the, the legacy guys from before we were even born, Alan Page and whatnot. Like, you probably can't put him in that category quite yet. But
mm-hmm.
for our generation, basically, 90, like basically Randy Moss to now, I mean, he's got to be top 5 probably.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm overstretching here, but, I can't think of too many, Randy Moss, Adrian Peterson. Yeah, Harrison Smith's got to be right there. Kevin Williams, he should definitely be in the conversation as well. Yeah, he's got to be up there as one of the pinnacle guys over our generation, at least.
Well, one of the guys that's not up there is somebody that we just recently re-signed last night. And when we were at Lake Monster, we obviously had a lot of conversation about whether it was a good move or not. But the Vikings decided to bring back Alexander Mattison on a 2-year deal worth $7 million that can get up to $8 million, but pretty hefty in guarantees at about $6.3 million. So after the night has settled and you've had some time to sleep on it, how are you feeling about the Vikings bringing back Alexander Mattison?
Yeah, initially when the news dropped, I think I immediately Erasmus James. I immediately just tweeted out like pathetic, like this is just a waste of money. And yes, I was definitely an overreaction. I Alexander Mattison doesn't really do much for me, and would I have much rather gone and try to draft somebody and just kind of let that individual and Ty Chandler and assuming we move on from Cook, kind of battle it out for the running back carries. I probably would have went that route. People are saying, this is a great deal, $3.5 million a year. Sure, yeah, that's not that bad for a running back, but when you could have been paying, basically a combined under 2 for your 3 running backs, not including CJ Ham. I don't think that a rookie is going to perform much worse than Alexander Mattison, and that's not a knock on Madison. He's a good back, but again, running backs are interchangeable in my opinion. So unless you're a special talent like Dalvin Cook once was. So I'm not a big fan of giving running back second contracts, but after thinking about it, it gives us a little bit of a security blanket in terms of what we do in the future. And again, he's a good, effective runner. He's not great. He's not going to, open up a game wide open like Cook has even done last year, but he's going to get you the consistent yardage. He's going to get you really good pass protection as a pass blocker from the running back position. And he's got some hands. So, it's definitely not a bad move. I just would have gone a different route personally.
Yeah, I think when people obviously think of Alexander Mattison, the first one, the first memory that's going to come to mind is when he just didn't cut outside versus Seattle. But I'm okay with the move after I've slept on it. I do agree that the NFL draft is probably a more, a better avenue to maybe get a running back instead of signing somebody. But Madison's good in pass protection. I thought he showed more burst and energy than Dalvin Cook did last year, to be honest. But what I think this move really tells us is that if we were questioning whether Cook is going to be back with the team or not, like maybe this is just another way similar to how they signed Marcus Davenport. They're just kind of hedging their bet a little bit to say, hey, we're fine if we're keeping Davenport and Zadarius Smith, or we're fine keeping Mattison and Cook. But if we need to move on, well, you have that option.
I'd be so the inverse here, right? So if we kept Davenport, obviously we're keeping Davenport, we just signed him. But if we're going to keep Zadarius Smith to pair up with Davenport and Hunter, I'm okay with that. I don't think you can have too many pass rushers.
Yeah.
I will be very upset if Dalvin Cook's still on this roster after making this signing, because the fact that you already have $14 million in one running back spot, $3 million at your fullback, and then to go now and pay another $3.5 to Alexander Mattison. And I don't know exactly what the cap hit structure exactly is, but that's just too much for the running back position. So in my opinion, this is the end of Dalvin Cook in the Vikings uniform. And my guess is, they're probably planning a cut, but there's definitely some options in the trade market where, I put out a tweet earlier that, the Bills potentially could be interested after losing Devin Singletary, even though they still could bring him back and pair him up with his brother. But also teams like, that you wouldn't, I guess, necessarily think of, like the Commanders, who have Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, but neither one of those guys really moved the needle too much. So to give maybe a little bit more of a dynamic runner for Sam Howell to have at his disposal. And again, similarly, the Atlanta Falcons with Desmond Ridder, you want to give these young quarterbacks a reliable running back to work off of. And I know the Falcons had Cordero Patterson and their rookie last year available to them. But I just think that, bringing in somebody with a little bit more credibility and consistency like Dalvin Cook, and they're all going to have cap space because they're working off rookie contracts. So the
Panthers, had they not signed Miles Sanders, probably would have been a good fit too. If you think about,
that would have been a great one.
Them taking, a young quarterback, you kind of want a workhorse, and they can sort of abuse Dalvin Cook in that. There's a few comments here that I want to get to. This one for me really stands out, and I think it's a good point. Seems like Kwesi's really trying to fill a glaring depth and not force a draft pick. We've been really big on this show talking about not forcing yourself into a corner to take a position. We've seen when that happens with the previous regime. When you look at Laquan Treadwell, when you look at Garrett Bradbury is a perfect example. Granted, he's back. But yeah, that does seem to be the theme this offseason for Kwesi. Getting younger, filling depth, and ensuring that come draft night, you don't have to feel forced to take a corner or we haven't seen a wide receiver move yet, but take a wide receiver and so on and so forth. So
yeah. And it looks like Andrew had, wrote, where are we getting all this money from? So with the Harrison Smith news, actually, we save about $6 million.
Yes.
So we actually gained quite a bit of money for that move, which is obviously, great for us. Will help us allow us to, afford the Alexander Mattison signing and subsequent signings that we have going forward.
Yeah, his base salary was scheduled to be about $14.7 million, and I mean now it's going to be down by 8. So I mean we're saving quite a bit of money, and obviously too, there's going to be some more news likely today. I know a lot of guaranteed bonus money gets paid out today.
Tomorrow, I think.
Or tomorrow. Sorry, I'm thinking it's Friday.
It's because you're drinking already.
I know, man. I know. It's a great time to drink. We also are likely to see a Brian O'Neill restructure. I mean, that's been, talked about from everybody, all across the media. So that will come and save us some money as well. Comment here, Z and Cook most likely to be traded on draft night. Yeah, I think that's a potential for sure. I'd like to see him moved sooner than that. So, but yeah,
my guess is we'll try to probably get off those contracts by tomorrow, just because, and then there's additional guaranteed money that needs to be paid out at that time. So we'll probably try to get off those contracts earlier than draft night for sure.
Yeah. Doug Peters sends a note to us here. Hope we sign DJ Chark. You've talked about DJ Chark, and I think that's, for me personally, when we think about free agency moving forward, that's kind of like the last sort of position I want to see them address. And DJ Chark would be a great addition, I think, to this roster.
Yeah, he definitely brings an element to the team that we don't currently have, which is, Justin Jefferson has the skill set, but we use him in so many different ways. But to have somebody more dedicated to that true X position, where you have a big body receiver that can take a top off a defense and kind of run those vertical routes, take some pressure off of Justin Jefferson because you're going to want to have some safety help potentially. And if you don't, then we're going to have some one-on-one opportunities downfield. So I think DJ Chark would be a great addition. He had mentioned Rock Yassin as well as an option at cornerback. I know you're a big fan. Whether it's him, whether it's Sean Murphy Bunting, whether it's Greedy Williams, Shaquille Griffin, one of those guys would be great to bring in for additional depth there.
What do all those guys have in common, by the way?
Except for Shaquille Griffin, they're all young.
And this is like your favorite thing in a prospect.
Dogs? I wouldn't call it. No, I wouldn't really call any of them dogs, to be honest.
Really? I would call Rock Yassin one.
Maybe. I haven't watched enough of him recently, but I didn't really feel that way coming out.
Up and you just let me down, Ryan.
Well, you gotta set me up with better guys.
Doug Peters says he's wanted Mattison to be the lead back for 2 seasons. Think he's just as skilled as Cook. I think there's a point to be made there from last season for sure. And I think we're both fine with Mattison. It's just we don't want both, right? It's just too much money tied up at a running back position for a team that didn't emphasize the run enough last year. And we've heard from Doogie on this show that there's a greater emphasis to run more next year. But I don't think you need to tie up, a good portion of your cap with two running backs. Like,
right.
Go look at, there was a post shortly after the Super Bowl about Super Bowl winning teams in the contract that the running back was who started on that team. And it's always super minimal. So just that's my issue there. Mary says, can't wait for draft night. Dell Henderson.
Me neither, Mary.
Naylor for wide receiver too. Yeah, maybe. KJ Osborne took a jump, but I don't know.
That'd have to be a pretty big jump because, he basically only got garbage time playing time last year. So, but again, KJ Osborne didn't have any play time at receiver really his rookie year either. So we'll kind of see. We'll see what happens. If I obviously take an opportunity to put everything you have into that and evaluate them, but we definitely need to bring in additional competition. One probably via draft and one probably via free agency.
100%. I don't have anything else for you, but I do agree with Doug's comment here. Hit that like button. Let's get these guys on the feed more. I agree. I'm all on board for that. So tomorrow morning, Friday, the 17th, we're going live again. And this time we have NFL cap expert Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus joining us. He's going to help us talk about the Vikings cap, this restructure with Harrison Smith. We've seen some others. But really, we want to get him on to understand, what was Kirk Cousins' cap restructure? Because I feel like we don't really have a good feel for how that is. And so he's going to get on and explain that for us all tomorrow morning. So make sure you tune in. That's 8:30 in the morning. It's an early one for us. We've really
Central
shifted.
Time, yeah.
Yeah, shifted. We used to be 8 at night, and now we've just slowly gotten earlier in the day. But that doesn't mean we can't still drink. So I'll plan on pouring one tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow I'm fine doing it. I have the day off tomorrow, but my day job probably won't be too happy if I'm drinking on a live show during my lunch break. So
for sure. But thank you to everyone joining us in the chat here. Remember, subscribe. Like I said, we have a bunch of content coming out in the future months. So until next time, everybody, Skol Vikings.